Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the episode Recap and Thoughts category. This video will be dedicated to episode 17 of Young Justice, Disordered. We begin this episode at Mount Justice on October 23rd, where we see that the Young Justice team are still traumatized by the events of the simulation training exercise from the previous episode, Failsafe. When Batman finds out about this after entering the cave, he admits that he was hoping that the young heroes would get over the experience by now, but Martian Manhunter responds that trauma is something that can have lingering consequences, something that Batman, of all people, should know. We see that Black Canary is holding therapy sessions for the young heroes regarding the simulation training exercise gone wrong, and Superboy is the first of the young heroes to have a therapy session with Black Canary, but he doesn't want to talk about it, and he even storms out of the room. Meanwhile, in Metropolis, we see a portal opening up. It's designed in the same way as the portal that the Sphere came from back in Bereft. And this is the work of a device known as a boom tube. Now, out of this particular portal is a flying car. Well, it looks like a flying car anyway. And there are 5 individuals in the car, or the flying car-like vehicle. They speak in a language that's not familiar to us, the audience, at first, but then, thanks to a device known as a mother box, they start to speak in the tongue of whichever language you're watching the show in. So if you're watching in the original language, English, but if you're watching in a different dub, they'll, of course, talk in the language of that particular dub, but I digress. So these 5 individuals are called the Forever People, and they also have the mother box with them. They have it camouflage extraterrestrial energy signatures and to scan Earth, or look through Earth to see if it can find any of the stolen technology from their home planet, New Genesis. And the mother box is able to find what they call the New Genosphere, and they're determined to reclaim the New Genosphere after it was stolen. Back at Mount Justice, Superboy and Wolf are preparing to leave in the motorcycle that he's been working on in the previous episodes. But Sphere stops Superboy and Wolf from leaving and transforms into... The best way I can describe this form is a flying motorcycle. That's the best way I can think of to explain it. And Superboy and Wolf are both surprised, but yeah, Superboy, Wolf, and Sphere all decide to leave Mount Justice. And Batman wants Superboy to return, but he notices Superboy left his communicator behind, so there's no way to get a hold of Superboy for now. Now, throughout the course of the episode, we see the therapy sessions for the rest of the Young Justice team, but I'm going to go ahead and mention them all right now so we can focus on the main plot of the episode afterwards. So, Artemis follows after Superboy for the therapy sessions, but like Superboy, she doesn't want to talk about it, claiming that she didn't experience any trauma because she was the first to go into a coma. And she also, even though Artemis claims that she knows that there's nothing wrong with opening up to her friends, she still is unwilling to open up to her friends. Black Canary mentions how Artemis is still keeping secrets from them. Aqualad is next, and he's much more open about the trauma he dealt with from the training exercise. He says that he regrets that he sacrificed himself because it meant the team was without a leader for the rest of the simulation, and he thinks that he should step down as leader. But when looking through or reciting all of the rest of the team members when he's going over their personalities. He and Black Canary do agree that Robin is the most logical choice, but Aqualad is unwilling to place the burden of being a leader on Robin because he is so young, even though Black Canary points out that Aqualad himself is young still. So Aqualad decides he'll have to stay leader for the time being. Kid Flash claims that he's fine, that he didn't suffer any trauma, and when Black Canary points out that he's in denial, he says he's content with that. Robin is very open about his experiences with the simulation, saying that while he did what he had to do for the sake of the mission, he didn't enjoy it. And we saw back in Drop Zone that Robin had wanted to be the leader of the Young Justice team, and he says that he always expected to become the next Batman, but he doesn't have the same drive that Batman does to complete the mission no matter what, and he doesn't want to be the next Batman. Miss Martian also shows regret, and she's open about her trauma regarding the experience. She blames herself for it, even though she didn't purposefully hijack the simulation. It was an accident. And during the session, she changes into her human disguise, but when Black Canary says she's turned white, as in Miss Martian has turned white, Miss Martian freaks out before she quickly figures out that Black Canary meant white as in Caucasian. And Black Canary also adds that trying to not do certain things or not be yourself, as she puts it, isn't the right way to go about it, mentioning that her first canary scream left her classmates, she was in the first grade when it happened, in a bad predicament, and she tried not talking for a while. And Black Canary also adds that Martian Manhunter would certainly be willing to help Miss Martian out with training regarding her abilities. So now that we have the therapy sessions complete, we can go on to the main plot of the episode. So at the Eastern Seaboard, Superboy, Wolf, and Sphere all cross paths with the Forever People, and they demand that Superboy hand over Sphere or else they will attack. But Sphere and the Mother Box communicate with each other and quickly clarify to the Forever People that Superboy didn't steal Sphere. He actually saved Sphere from the ones who truly stole Sphere. So they quickly become friends with Superboy and they introduce themselves. The Forever People members are Viking, Serapin, Moonrider, Dreamer, and the fifth member says he's actually named after an animal that isn't from Earth, so he'll use an animal name for his name for the sake of simplicity. He thinks Wolf at first, but because there's already Wolf, Wolf, Superboy's pet, he decides to go with Bear, deciding Bear sounds cooler. So Superboy agrees to help the Forever People out when they explain to him that they're looking for various stolen technology from their home planet, New Genesis. They eventually come across a construction site, which is next to the Metropolis Federal Reserve. And this is appropriate because one of the technology that was stolen is a drill. It's being used by a group of criminals known as Intergain. The leaders of Intergain are Bruno, Ugly Mannheim, and Whisper. And soon enough, though, the Forever People recognize some of the technology they're using as not just from New Genesis, but from Apocalypse as well. Superboy is confused about this, but they don't really have time to explain it to him because they're being attacked and in a tunnel. And being in the tunnel is giving Intergain the advantage, so the Forever People manage to get them up on the surface to gain the advantage. They say a battle cry, and then they turn into a giant robot is what it looks like. And eventually, this robot is powerful enough to defeat most of Intergain, Ugly Mannheim retreats with a boom tube portal while Whisper is captured, and then the robot turns back into the Forever People. They explain to Superboy that what he saw was Infinity Man, and they explain that when they merge with what they call the Source, that's how they become Infinity Man. And so Dreamer uses her abilities to figure out from Whisper where they're getting the technology from. And they realize that the supplier is someone named Desaad. And Superboy points out he's been extremely patient, which is quite the feat for him. So he really wants answers now. So they do explain to him that the Forever People are new gods, and the new gods are from two different planets. New Genesis, which represents life, and Apocalypse, which represents anti-life. Desaad is a new god from Apocalypse. And they do mention that Desaad has a master, but we don't get to hear the master's name. All that's said is unspeakable. So eventually they managed to track more of the technology at a hangar. Superboy doesn't see anything though with his infrared vision, but they still try to be cautious all the same, and they were right to be, because it turns out that the technology is immune to Superboy's infrared vision, and it's also immune to illusions, or it can dispel illusions at the very least. So while the fight goes on here, the Forever People decide it's time to form Infinity Man yet again. But we find out that Desaad was hiding there. He was disguised as one of the Intergain thugs. And now that he reveals himself, and he throws what he calls a father box, the opposite of a mother box, I imagine. And during the merger into Infinity Man, so now Infinity Man has been possessed, and Desaad more or less can control Infinity Man now, and he orders Infinity Man to eliminate Superboy and Wolf. Now the fight goes on for a while because Desaad admits he likes to drag out fights, or he likes to torture his victims or play with his food, so to speak. And at one point, Sphere retreated, but then Sphere returns and jumps on top of Infinity Man. I imagine that Sphere was probably trying a sneak attack, and Superboy works together with Sphere. Oh, that's right. I should mention that this episode reveals that Sphere is female. So Superboy and Sphere work together to control Infinity Man to override the Father Box's control over Infinity Man, and they're able to win the battle, essentially. Desaad plans to escape using a boom tube portal, but before he retreats, he throws a grenade, and Sphere takes the blunt of the attack. Sphere gets the most injuries from the grenade explosion. Infinity Man turns back into the Forever People, and they try to use the mother box they have on hand to heal Sphere, and it seems to be working. They say that Sphere's healing process has begun, and they plan to have her healing process continue on New Genesis, as they plan to bring her back to New Genesis. But Superboy isn't too keen on this idea because he admits that he and Sphere have bonded together and he's grown quite fond of her. And the Forever People see that Superboy is sincere about his words, so they allow him to watch over Sphere for them. Back at Mount Justice, it's a little while later, and some of the Justice League members are looking over Sphere, and they're talking to each other about Superboy's recent adventure. He actually did report it to them after he returned. And Batman says that Superboy's report is definitely worth further investigating. Investigating even further. And he also questioned Or that's right, some of the Justice League members do question where Superboy is now, though, and we see he's returned to Black Canary for another therapy session, and this time he's much more open about his feelings. And it turns out he wasn't in despair over what happened, because he was actually happy because he got to be Superman in a sense. But he does feel guilty that he didn't feel despair over what happened. Black Canary admits that she doesn't have an easy answer for him, but she says that admitting it is the first step, and that's where we end the episode. So we have ourselves another spotlight episode for Superboy, and this also continues the storyline that started in Bereft when Sphere first arrived, and we get to learn a little bit more about Sphere. Like, she's female, and she was from New Genesis. And New Genesis and Apocalypse are part of the New Gods series that Jack Kirby created for DC. And yeah, I thought that was a pretty cool touch that we got to learn a little bit more about the New Gods and, yeah, the New Gods from New Genesis and Apocalypse. They did touch up about it in the DC animated universe. Superman the Animated Series actually put an especial emphasis on the New Gods, and that's led some people wondering, was the fact that Superboy was the Unjustice team member who crossed paths with the New Gods, was that meant to be a nod to Superman the Animated Series, putting emphasis on the New Gods? Truth be told, I'm not sure. I don't know if that was intentional. I don't know if that was a coincidence. But, or maybe that was just because Superboy bonded with Sphere, who's connected to the New Gods. So, yeah, I'm not entirely sure. But if it was intentional or if it was a coincidence, it was cool all the same. And yeah, the Forever People did make cameos in the DC animated universe, but this one we got to see them in a more prevalent role. And, oh, that's right, yeah. And yeah, I thought that was a pretty interesting choice that they didn't actually mention who Desaad's master is, because most people familiar with DC should know who Desaad's master is, but they were kind of keeping it very hush-hush, and I'm guessing maybe that's for new viewers who are going in blind, who have no prior knowledge about DC, and I can actually appreciate that, I can definitely appreciate them, like, keeping some secrets for new viewers who aren't too familiar with DC, so I'll do the same. I'll keep quiet about who Desaad's master is for the sake of those who are new to DC, who have no prior knowledge, even if most people already do know the answer to that. But yeah, that was a very interesting choice. And oh yes, Infinity Man. From what I read, he was actually portrayed differently here compared to in the main comics, where he's treated, like I said, he's more like a robot here, but he's more like an actual character, I guess, in the main comics. So that's just another example about how there are going to be differences between adaptations and the source material, but I didn't have any problems with it. But it's an interesting choice all the same, and I definitely would encourage people to look in a little more about Infinity Man and the Forever People, just to see those differences that they have between the main comics and this adaptation. Otherwise, I did like how they did have the therapy sessions for what happened in Failsafe. Like I mentioned before in the recap and thoughts for Failsafe, it wasn't just a one-done deal. Like, they didn't just have, okay, it was a simulation, let's move on with the rest of the show. They actually brought up that, yeah, trauma can last a while, and it can have long-lasting consequences, as Martian Manhunter put it. And it was good we got to see some insight for the Unjustice team. Some were in denial, or some didn't want to open up, some were very open, and Superboy, we got to see his progress as a character, and that was another thing I liked about this episode. But with that said, we've now discussed episode 17 on this channel. Take care, and until next time.